Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first official episode of The Limit Breakers. This week, we're going to be talking about MMOs, what makes a good MMO, what makes a bad MMO, what makes MMOs so addictive. We're also joined by a very special guest today. I'm not going to introduce him right now, but if you stay tuned after the theme song, you will get to meet him in person for yourself. My name is Justin. Let's dive into episode 1.
If you are a repeat listener, welcome back. If you're a new listener, welcome. Thank you for that introduction, Justin. My name's Cameron. I'm joined with our other co-host,
Steven.
And we are joined with a very cool, very special, very my cousin-y guest, Mike. What's going on, Mike?
Oh, that was just those introductions were just fantastic. I'm it's good to be back.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you. We're very glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Guys, as Justin mentioned earlier, we're doing MMOs today. Very exciting topic because we all have quite a bit of experience with MMOs, and I think we have quite a bit to add in the way of stories, strong opinions, a lot of experience, and I'm really excited to dive into an episode that is going to be gaming content centric and not just us talking about ourselves. So let's start off each episode, I think, talking a little bit about what we've been playing recently. I think it'd be kind of a good way to get the ball rolling. I don't know if you guys have been gaming quite a bit recently, but
Always.
Yeah. Actually, why don't you start, Steve? Because I know you were telling me about the game you were playing pretty recently.
Absolutely. So I am actually playing an MMO, but this would be a mobile version of an MMO. It's a game called Idle Crusade, and I mentioned it a few times to you guys, but I'll go over it very briefly. It would be considered an incremental RPG and an MMO because of the online community, and it's very fascinating because it's an RPG where the battles actually happen out of your control, but everything that is in your control is how you set up your characters, where you're battling for experience, of course, dynamics like the arena, Dragon's Cave, other little challenges. But essentially, it's fascinating because it's an RPG that, like many more modern mobile RPGs, really integrate time as a type of essential resource, a type of essential factor in the way you play. And learning how to integrate that into your schedule and how to use it to your advantage competitively has been really the excitement for me.
Can I ask a question about that one? So I've played some mobile kind of tactical games like Clash of Clans. What's different about this idle command compared to some of the other?
Right. So Clash of Clans is a good example just because it's so mainstream and so popular. Right. To kind of contrast with this. It's less, I would say, strategic than Clash of Clans in the sense that that your characters are always battling, and it's not made up of single segmented episomes of sort of conflict. Moving on.
Cool.
How about you, Mike? What have you been playing?
Oh, okay. So it's not an MMO or an RPG, but I've really been enjoying the game Rocket League lately, and if anyone out there is like me, has been kind of a Rocket Leaguer. I'm a veteran now, level 30, and it's just it's kind of an addictive, really intuitive game that I think is a good way to just kind of kill some time.
I haven't actually played Rocket League, but I'd say like 9 out of the 10 top videos on Reddit/r/gaming in the last 6 months have been Rocket League highlights, so it looks like a really fun game.
It seems like every game that you enter, there's someone that's like a so-and-so gaming and like they're streaming, and it's kind of like, wow, there's a lot of people streaming, and then you try to make them rage quit.
How about you, Justin?
Well, currently I'm not playing an MMO. Sorry to let you down, but I am playing Red Dead Redemption, which is kind of a more classic title in recent years. And it does have that open world feel to it that you would get in an MMO. And right now I'm just I kind of really enjoy the aspect of the exploration of it, and been multiple times where I've just kind of tried to take on the entire town and kill everybody in the entire town, and then had the like the bounty hunters chase after me and try to capture me.
You mean you had your what handed to you?
Yes, several times.
And what is this? This is a console game, right?
It is. It's for the PS3.
PS3. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about that. That's sort of on my list of like new classics that I told myself I'd play at some point, and I actually just bought Red Dead Revolver, but have not played either, sad to say. So I'm glad you're enjoying that. I, as you guys probably know a little bit, have collected a ton in the last 6 months to a year. I've been growing my personal collection, and it's sort of ironic to say that in growing my collection and in prepping for this podcast, I've actually had less time to actually play games. So that's been sort of a shame, but I am playing Pokemon Alpha Sapphire for the 3DS, which I never saw myself playing a Pokemon game ever again, but it's actually been incredibly fun. I can see why people really still like the series. And I've also been playing the PS4 digital re-release of Final Fantasy VII, which over the course of the next couple episodes or maybe beyond that, you're going to learn a little bit more about my own history with Final Fantasy VII. But needless to say, it's one of my favorite games, and it's been really cool revisiting it. But
would you say the Pokemon game attains to the glory of Pokemon Snap?
No.
Yeah, nothing's ever going to reach that level. I think a lot of people consider Snap to
understand.
be. Yeah.
Understand.
It was one of the more challenging games that I came across in my high school years, and Cameron really helped me, gave me some much needed guidance in getting through that first cart ride.
Yeah, that was a big part of our bonding as kids, was trying to figure out hitting Pokemon in the head with Pokeballs back on 64 graphics was a big part of our bonding experience. But okay, thank you for putting up with what we've been playing. I think we really want to make that an important part of the beginning of each show to not only let you guys know a little bit about what we're doing, but also to maybe see if we're playing some of the same stuff you guys are playing, maybe introduce some stuff to you guys, maybe you guys introduce some stuff to us, just to sort of have a back and forth going. One last thing before we get into the meat and potatoes of this MMO episode, I want to sincerely thank anyone who's listened already. We did this without much in the way of real expectations about viewership, but it's been incredibly cool, at least for me. I think I speak for these guys too, to already have some feedback about our first episode, have some people talking about being excited for the second episode. So thank you so much to everyone that's already reached out and the people that have listened. Thank you guys sincerely.
Yeah, it really is all about that water cooler talk on Monday morning, right? Because I've heard about this through that at work, and then I heard from you that you were actually the people that did the podcast, so I was just thrilled to be on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that people are already, we're already out in the ether out there. So MMOs, guys. In discussing what we wanted our first gaming-centric episode to be, this was always one of the first things that came to mind, but I know we went back and forth about what it was going to be. In prepping for this episode, was this kind of bringing back any particular feelings for you guys, or was it just another gaming topic to you?
I mean, just another gaming. No, not at all. I mean, MMOs I think have been such a large part of my own experience. I've played through a lot of MMOs at this point. Certainly, EverQuest I think was the big unifying MMO in this particular group of people. But I also spent a great deal of time playing WoW, Shadowbane, Star Wars: The Old Republic, and Elder Scrolls Online. I think in my own memories, in some ways, might differ from the rest of the people in this group, just because I always had this sense of a competitive edge. I love playing DPS characters primarily because you could just quantify very clearly how well you're performing and tell people when they suck. And but I also spent a great deal of time doing PvP, which is not something I think that everyone else here did. So in Elder Scrolls Online, in particular, that was the height of my PvP career. But I'll let you guys speak before I brag.
Justin, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think the bulk of my time was probably spent with you guys. I think we talked about a little bit in episode 0 about how EverQuest was definitely a defining keystone game of our relationship. So I spent a lot of time always trying to do that with you guys. I was also kind of into, if you would, pseudo MMOs, things like .hack or Final Fantasy 12, things that kind of have that MMO feel to it, but aren't into like the social aspect of the doing quests with other people or going on raids and things like that.
Yeah, they're not actual online games, but they're super heavily influenced by the style of MMO, whether it be combat or just the layout of the world, that whole vibe.
Exactly.
How about you, Mike?
Well, firstly, I just thought of an interesting analogy in my head that I think Steve might appreciate. Nostalgia that I feel, but I kind of like to think of that timeline of MMOs, whereas Ultima Online being like the Socrates of MMOs, EverQuest being the Plato, and World of Warcraft being the Aristotle. Where would that put Elder Scrolls Online? Maybe like a Immanuel Kant or something like that? I'm just joking. Okay, so I started playing EverQuest in 2001. Cameron actually introduced me to it, and I was a senior in high school, and we picked it up at Best Buy, and the rest is history. I kind of, progressed my way to endgame, and then ended up there, and everything in between. It was mixed bag, but EverQuest really solidified that me as a gamer, I think.
I either have the dubious or glorious distinction of being the one I think that introduced MMOs to this group just by virtue of me ranting and raving so much about them. And I don't know if all these years later we consider that a good thing or a bad thing.
Because of EverQuest, I know what the word dubious means. So.
It actually, yes. I think I'd be shocked if any of us didn't learn that word from EQ at this point. Very good point, Mike. But Justin, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, I think Mike's being a little bit modest about his MMO stature, considering he.
We did do a tournament. It was for SOE Live 2 summers ago, and honestly, that was really the time in my MMO days where it was almost like everyone was kind of over the MMO aspect, and it was really just a group of friends, but it happened to be the best guild in the game. So it was really cool, and then we were competing, and we came in second place in this kind of timed run through of killing different raid targets.
Why did you come in first?
Because the other half of our guild, the 6 players that were also with our guild, won first. They won, I think, $10,000, and we won $5,000. So it was pretty cool to win that for 30 minutes playing a video game.
You heard it here, kids. MMOs are a good way to,
You pay for a trip to Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit about my own experience with MMOs. I started playing EQ in 2000 on a complete lark. I vividly remember the day I went to Best Buy to pick a game out. I don't think I'd ever even played anything online previous to that, so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I played EQ pretty faithfully off and on for 14, 15 years, from 2000 to 2014. I also have a little bit of experience with WoW, Shadowbane, Final Fantasy 11. I don't know if you want to consider the Diablo series an MMO. It's not an MMO RPG, but if you want to consider it an MMO, I've played my fair share of D2 and D3. So, as you can probably note, we're all big EQ players, but we do have experience outside of EQ that I think we're going to definitely touch on here. I think an important part of setting up what we're going to talk about later today is to get a sense of what we all liked most and least about MMOs, whether it be, and that might vary from game to game, but in general, what aspects really drew you in and what aspects either pushed you away or caused you to stop playing. Maybe to start a little bit, just to give you guys a sense of, what I was thinking of is, for me, MMOs, first and foremost, the most fun thing and the thing that always drew me in the most was the encouragement of exploration. A game that, maybe it'd be easy to talk about what turned me off because it leads into, saying turned me on sounds weird, but it did turn me on. By the end of me playing EQ, and as is the case in a lot of MMOs, it was a game where a lot of the old content was almost pointless because it was so endgame focused, and there was such a larger base of existing players than new players that a lot of the older zones and a lot of the newbie zones, if you will, really didn't serve much of a point anymore except to just sort of exist if you needed to. A certain quest required you to go there or something. But my favorite thing about MMOs was always when they utilized as much of the world as they possibly could to actually reward you for seeing more of it, to reward you for not doing the same thing over and over, to get you to have different experiences in the game itself. And when games started to get away from that is when I started to slowly but surely kind of tire of the genre. And I understand why those changes happened over time, but that, to get the ball rolling was probably the single biggest thing for me, just in terms of what made MMOs so exciting, and conversely, what started to make them a little bit more limiting to me. Anything jump out to you guys?
Yeah, to tack onto that, I think with the idea of kind of repetition of one thing, any kind of game that introduces like a heavy element of competition, you're always going to have those people that, and I don't particularly mind this because I think some people enjoy searching exploits. You're going to have that, I think, in WoW and in EQ. And I can't speak for WoW, but I know that was big in WoW too. It's kind of the exploiting, maybe not direct hacking, but so that happens. I can definitely concur with that. And then when you go back to a lot of the the zones that are just don't really play a part in the game anymore. It's almost like you're visiting this figment of time that used to be so lively, and now it's just kind of a ghost town, and it has this kind of emotional resonance to it that I kind of liked, but it was also a little bit depressing.
Yeah, for me, what makes a good MMO, honestly, and what always attracted me all the time to MMOs really was that notion of character customization and that ability to define yourself in a very radical way. And I, on one hand, this always takes place through some type of like class and ability system, but on another hand, it actually it extends down to all the little nitty gritty details. And so one thing that comes to mind, like I remember, I think probably in EverQuest, I was the only wizard on our server who actually had all of his weapon and armor skills maxed at any given time, to the point that I could actually tank a mob my level for at least 5 seconds, which was actually like truly extraordinary. But yeah, like things like that allowed me to really differentiate myself from everyone else and to like make a statement about who I am as a player through my avatar and through the play style I choose. I always found to be just so immersive and so fun.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of touched on many of the things that appeal to me. I feel like Cam was saying, he was talking about exploration. I definitely like the open world feel of an MMO, and being able to go on an infinite number of quests. You have many choices for places to level up, and it kind of gives you really like a limitless replayability. So you have a number of class systems and races that you can be, towns to explore, things like that. So I like the whole fantasy element of it. That was usually a big draw for me because I'm into like science fiction and fantasy, and a lot of the MMOs that I play were like that. On the flip side, I actually want to talk a little bit about what makes a bad MMO.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. Sensitive subject for all of us, I think. But as much as I enjoyed playing EverQuest, there were times where you would roll out a patch, and it would, like, the POK is specifically what I'm thinking of, Plane of Knowledge, for those of you who may not have played it, which allowed you the ability to teleport across continents and zones.
The hub, basically having
exactly. It's kind of like a hub, and I just felt like it took away from that expansiveness of the game. I spent, Mike can probably tell you about the time where I took a boat across from Felwith to the Common Lands, and I fell off and had to get a GM to pull me out of the water.
Yeah, that was a funny moment. I we all died in the water at some point in the MMO careers, and another friend of ours,
Some of
Andrew,
us did die more than others.
had to. I died in the water, and Andrew had to drag my corpse because I didn't know how to swim. You had to look up, and I couldn't figure that out. It was my second day in the game, so.
I think what you're talking about, in more specific terms, Justin, is just the catering of a lot of MMOs now towards streamlining content and making things easier and more accessible for everybody. And for some reason, and I think we all have had this experience, though I want to hear your guys' take on it. For some reason, EQ specifically, but all the games, they felt more fun in a certain sense and more exciting when things were actually far harder for the player and far more punishing to the player. There's nothing inherently fun about 3 hours to get your corpse back, but there was also this added level of danger and excitement and exploration that came with the way the game was laid out, and many games were laid out when they first came out, that when that was lost, at first it was cool to have things be so much more streamlined and so much more accessible, but after a while, like Justin was mentioning, it did take sort of a part of the spirit of the game away in a way that I never felt like it really got back. Did you guys feel that at all?
Oh, absolutely. And so another example, even beyond the retrieving your corpse, of where I think that element of gameplay came in, was actually when you played in EverQuest, in particular in Evil Race. So, for example, I actually, for a while, played a troll Shadow Knight named Razostin. And Razostin, he's actually well known for nearly besting a Paladin 10 levels his superior.
It was impressive, actually,
in a duel. But that's for another time. But anyway, one thing I loved about playing an Evil Race is that in order to progress, to get as you leveled up and as you needed to get to higher level hunting grounds to do higher level quests, you actually needed to sneak through or fight through like good areas to access other. So what I mean by that is that for example, High Hold Pass, High Keep, like you would actually need to get through good fortresses, whether through espionage or whether deception or just through like strategic maneuvers.
Factioning.
Yeah, factioning. Exactly.
That's a big thing.
And when the plane of knowledge was inserted into the game, and you had this ease of travel to virtually anywhere in the game, then you no longer had to resort to these types of maneuvers that really made you feel evil.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think what factions sprung to my mind because I do remember the sense of adventure that came with having to really weigh up whether you want to do something or not. In most video games, you can kind of say, okay, I'm just going to try it, and if it doesn't work, no big deal. In EverQuest, it was kind of like, if I try this, how much hassle is it going to be to actually recover from this? How much, is it worth it? So it really made you think about those things. And when we went to a new leveling zone, these guys were all evil races, and I was a good race, and they had to sneak me into it essentially, and it was a very adventurous feeling to be. I still remember the song I was listening to when we arrived in that zone. That's how much of an imprint this kind of stuff can leave on you.
Yeah, there was a very tangible cost to everything you did. You really had to decide whether or not something was worth it to you because, if you wanted to take that boat ride across the world, you actually had to think like, I'm going to spend a sizable chunk of my time today just trying to get to this place. Am I sure I want to go about doing that? Am I sure it wasn't as simple, like you said, as just I died or I went this place. Okay, in 20 seconds I can be fully rezzed back to the wherever I want to be and no harm done. It was like, do I want to spend my Saturday this way? Do I want to spend all the time that I've saved up all this money and all this gear this way? Do I want you couldn't just go around willy-nilly or you'd never get anything done.
Right, and just to add to that, I mean, even if you're going to a place that you're not aligned factionally with, then in addition to always being on watch, suddenly it's a lot harder to sell your loot and upgrade your gear, and it's you're always weighing cost and benefit of all your choices in a way that you didn't have to after the plane of knowledge.
There's a real not just monetary economy, but an economy for your time really too. And tying into what you said about being able to define kind of your uniqueness as a player, not just aesthetically, but by your play. That kind of, we had a friend of ours, Peter, that played, who was a very conservative player, and he would always kind of stick to the longer time investment for something that was a safe bet. Whereas our friend Andrew's probably more liberal. He would kind of go for it, and sometimes it would backfire. So I liked that aspect too.
Yeah, and I think in a game like EverQuest, I think I was glad that the creators actually realized that whole dynamic of the game, and that's why later on, as the years went on, they actually reset the whole server where you had to unlock all of the expansions once again and do things the old-fashioned way, because there was definitely a great sense of satisfaction in spending the amount of time and doing those quests or traveling to those places to be able to play that game in a more fuller sense.
One thing that I think is worth touching on, that Mike used the word economy to convey a different point, but I think it might be worth talking about in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in terms of what makes a good MMO good. One thing I used to love about EverQuest was just the whole East Commonlands dynamic, which was just literally just people from all around Norath would gather in East Commonlands with things that they wanted to sell, pilfer, whatnot. And when the bazaar was installed, it really kind of flattened that economy, I think. And it just, in some ways at least, destroyed the whole dynamic of having to seek out and find the right buyer or seller.
The cool thing about that, he mentioned a zone called East Commonlands. I'll try to be more broad. It wasn't a zone that was intended for selling. It was something the players just started. They recognized this as a setting up there and selling in a very just kind of basic way. The game, like most MMOs that are like WoW and stuff, they have introduced buying and selling systems that made things easier. But I like how that stuff kind of spontaneously emerged.
And that's one aspect of, it's all obviously specific to online games because it requires a community, but the organic growth of and specific practices that grow just out of a player's willingness or desire to set something up, having nothing to do with the game actually. There was nothing that said if you want to sell something, run to this giant tunnel and everyone hold bags out. It just, for whatever reason, it developed that way, and it became a core part of the game that everybody understood. And it's really, really cool to see those things happen without any type of developer direction at all. If there's one thing, to switch topics a little bit, but to stay in the same ballpark, that I think we can all definitely understand and have all experienced to varying degrees, it's a point that Steve made the other day, and very aptly, the idea of keeping up with the Joneses in MMOs, in terms of the desire to always feel like within an MMO, to need to keep playing and keep doing things to keep pace with maybe it's a particular person, the rest of your guild, or everybody at large. I've certainly felt that feeling a lot myself. I know we all used to struggle even within our own group about this, but why do you guys think that the desire to do that was so much stronger here than in other games where you might want to be better than your friends, you might want to win, you might want to whatever, but this was almost like there was experiences we had playing where people actually got mad having to do other things in real life because they weren't making progress in the game. What was it that made that impact so strong in MMOs specifically?
Well, I think a big part of it is that whole social dynamic. I mean, you as like there's more expansions, as there's more quests to go on, as there's new armor coming out and things like that. There's definitely that strong sense of competition and like dog eat dogness, if you will, of trying to be the best and trying to really attain something that's kind of unattainable. I mean, there's always going to be a new better thing coming out, or you want to keep up with your friends and stay at the same level as they are so that you can travel to the same zones that they're in and go on quests with them, things like that. So I feel like the social dynamic, which in a sense makes the game, an MMO, like different and a good quality, it can also make it a bad thing because you have, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is here.
Well, Cam, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, actually, and Justin, I think exactly what you were saying is very similar to how I feel. And to get an added perspective, I wanted to, instead of just leaving this open, kind of pose a direct question to Steve and Mike. Mike has the most experience, I think, of any of us with end game content, specifically in EQ, but has the most time spent and most accomplishments made in terms of the actual sort of competitive end game of EQ. And Steve had, I don't know Elder Scrolls Online well, but I know that what he did in Elder Scrolls Online was difficult and pretty rare to achieve. So having actually reached the upper echelon of the competitive side of both of these games, what drove you guys to do that? Did you feel compelled to succeed or become powerful out of some particular sense, or was it just it was fun for you to approach it that way? What would you say was the reason why you found yourself in the upper tier of the game you played?
Sure. So yeah, that's actually a really good question that I'm actually excited to answer. I would say one thing that really kind of drove me to the top, particularly in Elder Scrolls Online, was just this desire always to try things that hadn't been done before. I think that's the advantage, some ways, of a video game, is that you can do things without truly risking much, even though you do, of course, risk some level of time. And as it pertained to Elder Scrolls Online, it's really just a lot of tweaking, usage of abilities, and a type of class orientation to develop just for player versus player combat, the perfect ganking strategy. I mean, I basically, just to give you some basic understanding, on one hand, you have two weapon setups in Elder Scrolls Online, and I had a bow and a two-handed axe, and I would try to time it that I would use a very long cast time, snipe, and then charge in and hit them just at the moment the arrow actually hit them. So it was a massive burst followed by just like a string of just execution abilities. But I really just refined and perfected my ganking ability over time to the point that the type of numbers I could accrue on a daily basis was extraordinary, to the point actually many streamers were actually very frustrated at just how badly I slaughtered them.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's he's a very confident man over there. I like that. I don't want to get too somber here, but coming from a place where I have experienced kind of that the addictive qualities of MMOs, I think that this is something psychologically and sociologically can really tie into a lot of what we see in culture today, like in the internet age, is that it is appealing and sometimes easier to become someone through the medium of the internet. In that way, and I don't take away from that in terms, because it is possible, and there was a big element of that for me when I discovered this social world that was, it almost at times it felt more real than the real world to me, and it was it very much was an addiction. I don't, if I could ballpark my played time of EverQuest over 15 years, I'd probably say I probably spent almost 2 years of playtime. Probably 600, 700 days. So yeah.
Would it be fair around the table to say that whether it be EQ or just in totality, that MMOs are probably the genre that you've spent the most actual playtime in of any type of game? I'm not assuming that's true, but I think it's true for Mike. It's true for me.
It better be true. I just said 2 years.
It's absolutely true for me.
Yeah, I think I had at least one character that had at least over a week of playtime, and I'm sure that's minimal compared to what you guys had. So,
yeah, I mean that was a perfect segue, Mike. I think what Mike raised is a really crucial aspect to understanding the MMO phenomenon, which is beyond even the desire to keep up with the Joneses in terms of actually making your character more powerful. Is just this phenomenon of people devoting time and almost this surrogate inside MMOs, not even directly pertaining to getting better at the game per se, but just wanting to be in the world that the MMO creates. And I think to varying degrees, we've all experienced that. There was times when we would all spend what felt like days inside EverQuest where we weren't really accomplishing all that much from the standpoint of getting more powerful or questing. We were just kind of having fun being in the game of EQ together. And, a certain aspect of that is just interacting with other people in general, whether it be on headsets playing a first-person shooter or in an MMO. But there is something particular to MMOs, I think, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about it, that it does engender more of there's socialization in other types of games, but why is it that in MMOs you get things like in-game weddings and real romantic relationships born out of MMO interactions? And there's some ingredient or magical element of MMOs that just seems to breed a lot more relationship type stuff than other games seem to. Even if you guys didn't have that experience yourselves, have you seen that and you kind of think you might know why that is? I'm curious.
Well, I have had that experience myself, although I can't speak to specific events like weddings and funerals that you're. I do think one of the points I made earlier just about what really drew me to MMOs in the first place, that sense of customization and ultimately I think just expression. Like, because of the degree to which you can customize your character, your avatar, you can express yourself in a very thorough way. And I think that level of expression is what allows people to start to have types of real relationships.
Yeah, I mean, that was really in high school. I was kind of a bit of a loner, and then obviously I started hanging out with these guys a lot more and playing EQ, but it really was the first time I started to kind of dabble in expressing myself, and I think that's a big factor in it. And also someone who's had some cool experience of meeting a lot of people that I've played these games with. People are different when you're dealing with their avatar as opposed to in person. Like my friendships with people changed drastically after I had met them in person and seen that, they type different, that sharp contrast between texting and talking, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the form of using it as a form of escapism is definitely a big thing, and being able to rebrand yourself, outside of the real world. I'm sure, like, as cliche as it sounds, I mean, there's definitely people who have played MMOs or games in general, for the sake of avoid, because they feel powerful and they feel like, it's a way for them to get back at people that were bullying them. If Steve was telling me he was gonna like kill me, and then I just wanted to vent and take off some steam because I knew I couldn't overpower him in an actual fight,
That's true.
I would I would be more than happy to run home as fast as I could and just slaughter a bunch of orcs or whatever it might be. Or
That's about as high level as Justin got in Crush Pin.
That's true.
Yeah, I think games in general can be a very powerful form of escapism, and I think MMOs more specifically are an even more immersive and particularly addictive and elaborate form of escapism. So if you're already using games as a sort of a way to get away from whatever you're dealing with, personally, of that to a very potentially extreme degree, I think.
I absolutely agree, and I think, and this is just a thought that came to mind, but I do think I'm going to write a book about it one day. But
I doubt that.
I want to read that. Yeah,
but I think a lot of the addictive nature in MMOs somehow combines like these timeless elements of like human nature in terms of relationships, but with this idea of progress and achievement that so clearly define the games, your level, your power, your equipment, and what happens is you actually feel like you're making progress with regard to your like own human nature, which is crazy and not quite true, but
yeah, the same thing. I mean, it's really not much different than the professional world that adults, as you grow up and kind of get settled in your career, that's the kind of world you enter into, that competitive world where even though you're living it, you still have like this next notch that you're trying to reach, and there's still this expectation that you mentioned that one day you're going to achieve it, but it's really all about the carrot with life in the game and real life. It's really like the carrot. If it's not there, what's the point?
Yeah, I think actually that's almost a spot-on analogy for what I was planning on saying myself.
Sorry.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm super glad you said that because, tying into both what I liked about MMOs, what eventually turned me off to MMOs, and the notion of this feeling the need to keep up. When I decided to start considering not playing MMOs anymore was when I broke it down and kind of explained it to myself as anything in life, and gaming is no exception. Either the journey should be fun or the destination you're going to reach should be fun. If neither is any fun for you anymore, then it begs the question, what's the point? EQ and MMOs at large for me is the leveling process, is the growing in the game fun for me, or will becoming powerful be fun for me? If neither is fun for me anymore, why exactly am I putting this time in? And that isn't to say that those things were never fun for me, because they were incredibly fun and we all have very fond memories of it. But my breaking point was sort of this idea of, is the carrot I'm chasing going to be that exciting for me? What exactly am I trying to achieve? If the end goal isn't that cool to me and the leveling is sort of monotonous, then, what is the point anymore? And I do think that's a vicious cycle you can get caught in playing these games, is sort of going through the motions without any real particular goal in mind or any particular light at the end of the tunnel. You're sort of just in the habit of doing it. And I don't know if you guys ever fell into that, but that was really what kind of was my make or break it moment with MMOs.
I can touch on that. But did you have something you want to add? Because you can.
No, I was actually I was going to pose a question to you, Mike, about the fact of, again, I know you had purchased a couple of characters or sold a couple of characters, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like how did you feel? Did that take away from the game for you, or did it add something that you weren't able to do before? Or talk a little bit about the pros and cons.
That's a really good thing to bring up, because I think that's something that was really big in MMOs for a long time. It was interesting because the characters I purchased were more supplementary in nature, so I would want like a shell character of a healer, so it would be something that it was just weighing up the time investment of leveling a character up and having. Now selling a character, that was one that was a little bit trickier because A, there's a risk, but B, I mean, it is the loss is very real. You can't, it ties into what thing Cameron was talking about, the times, because I have started playing and quit multiple times throughout those 15 years and quit for long periods of time too. And it's weird how that desire to play comes rushing back. And when it comes rushing back, you do have to kind of keep up or like catch up and then start keeping up. So there's this massive time investment that goes into that. So selling a character was detrimental in that sense. Like I still have mine now. So I'm glad EQ's dead, but
so I just want to comment on that massive time investment that I think really can be the ruin of MMOs. I mean, the peak of my MMO playing I think was definitely Elder Scrolls Online, and when I spent at minimum 24 hours straight. I think it was closer to 48 hours, to be honest. Just competing in a player versus player tournament to become emperor, which I finally did and was very happy to. But it was, I would say, within weeks, probably not even 2 weeks afterwards, I actually quit the game.
Yeah, they took that emperor,
which is kind of like
emperor plaque down.
The ironic, yeah. I mean, on one hand, I felt like I had done everything there was to do, but on the other hand, you invest like this level of time that just drains you, and then you realize like, wow, I can never really do that again.
Do you feel like you have that sort of relationship with anything else in your life, or is it more just like MMOs in general that you feel that way?
I do feel like I have an addictive personality in some ways, and that it's not uncommon for me to really invest myself intensely in different hobbies and things. But I don't think anything has ever felt addictive or as like compelling as an MMO. In this, like, there's literally nothing else on earth in which I've done for like over 24 hours straight.
Yeah, not to toot our own horn, but I think we've done a really good job of talking in generality about a lot of these things. Why don't we go around real quickly and just maybe give a personal story or two about maybe the perfect embodiment of the most intense or involved or addicted moment we had within MMOs. So many come to mind immediately for me, and I know you guys have some good ones as well. On the topic of really kind of reaching levels of real, sincere, personal addiction, what have you. I know even within our own group of friends, one of the first things that came to mind was all of us pooling our money together in the game for what probably amounted to like 4 to 6 months of us all spending quite a fair bit of time each day doing things in the game and then putting our money together to make one big group purchase. And when we went to make that purchase, we actually were duped and the money ended up getting stolen. And I can remember the palpable amount of actual frustration and anger that came with feeling like all this energy and effort and fun had been all for naught and, wasted. And it really was, looking back, sort of funny, but at the time, very real how I wouldn't say we were in jeopardy of, ruining relationships ever, but there was an actual period of awkwardness amongst us as a group of friends because of this event. I know things like that probably spring to mind for you guys as far as like things that'll always stick with you in terms of really symbolizing your sort of experience with the game, whether it be for bad or good. But, what comes to mind for you guys first on just the topic of kind of summing up the highest highs or lowest lows of your MMO playing?
Sure. Okay. So it was probably the early 2000s after a lot of these guys had kind of left the game for a period of time, and I was kind of endeavoring on my own and trying to, really investing a lot of time in the game, probably at a point maybe 8 to 10 hours a day. And that was fairly... EverQuest had these things called epic quests, and they were class specific, and they were very involved, more involved than any quest I think that you'll find in really any mass multiplayer online game today. And it probably took about 6 to 8 months of solid time investment to get to the point where I had to go on an open raid where, you're investing 6 hours into with a group of random people to kill a dragon. And, I had a peace drop and I won the roll for it. And it was ninja looted after all the time. And it was just like, wow. But fortunately, the GM sorted it out. But that was, I invested a lot of time in that game. And the time investment was kind of what made it appealing to people that had a lot of time to invest, I suppose.
Absolutely. So, well, I already mentioned one of my more significant experiences, which was competing for Emperor in Elder Scrolls Online. I will touch on another one, and that was a challenge in Elder Scrolls Online called the Trial of Ascension. And essentially, this was a challenge where consisted of 10 levels, and in each level you had waves upon waves of enemies that would come after you, and you were in a team of 4. And it was exceedingly strategic, exceedingly intense. Basically, I would find myself out of breath. The challenge itself would take about 4 hours straight, in which it was so intense you literally didn't have time to breathe. And there was,
I know those type of things, yeah.
And it was I've never just felt so, I think, enthralled by anything in terms of both just adrenaline and high level strategy and reaction and And it was just a truly extraordinary experience that was amazing. And unfortunately, it took me probably 10 tries before I actually completed it.
Can I tell a joke real quick? That's sadly there's some truth to this. Okay, so I was a nicotine user for a long time. I recently quit, and definitely quit a few.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I can say that as someone who's not a virgin, that's experienced the after intercourse cigarette, it still did not get any better than beating that really difficult raid that you had to sit at the computer for hours, and then going outside and smoking after that raid is the most satisfying dose of nicotine I've ever had.
That's a bold claim.
It's very true for me, though. It's very, but yeah.
Would you say MMOs are better than sex?
They can be. They can be.
And I think that says all there is to say just about the level of enjoyment that can be had.
Exactly. There you go. You have it. They're better than sex, guys.
Do you want to weigh in, Justin, before I take us on a little bit of an emotional journey? Or
Sure. So for me, I think obviously it seems around the table we've all experienced some sort of pretty detrimental hardship in an MMO. And for me that was probably the most experienced because I had numerous deaths, where I was doing corpse retrievals and things like that. There's always the time investment of either having to, like I said, go get a corpse, or I would finally start getting powerful and getting leveled up, getting high leveled, and we'd all decide, hey, let's start a new character. And it's like, well, there goes like 200 hours of my life, leveling up this character. I'm going to start over another one and not play this one anymore, probably. So, I mean, it was still fun, don't get me wrong, but, just, I think that was when I realized, like, I'm spending, like, way too much time in this game.
Feeding off of that point, I can say I don't think I was ever more excited about EQ or any MMO than in planning with you guys what our next step or next characters were going to be. Starting a summer talking about MMOs for me was actually probably as much fun or more fun than actually seeing out our plans. I can vividly remember so many nights, just the first day of summer hit, everyone, breaking down, oh, I'm going to start this, you start that, we're going to do this, do that. And then doing it was fun. But that first night always was like the zenith of my level of excitement about the game itself.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't recount the story of Mike, joining for the first time in a while and actually having me write his new character name on like a whiteboard.
There was a whole I had a whole thing. I had a thing. I'm a big. I like to do things like that. Like have a thing for everything.
Yeah, it was. What
was that character's name, Mike?
It was Voltus Phoenix.
Voltus.
Yeah, we had an experience where Mike had been playing, he was so high leveled and we were comparatively so low leveled that us getting a chance to play with Mike was relatively rare. And Mike re-rolled, for those of you who don't know MMOs well, he basically started a new character to be able to play with us, and the experience of him starting that character was so exciting to us that we literally like gathered in a basement. He gave us a big, almost like introductory speech, and we physically wrote his character's name out on a chalkboard. So
I can't believe I did.
Yeah,
it
gives you a sense of how like ornamental.
When I just for your listeners, when I did that, it was for the express purpose of being funny.
Yes,
it wasn't meant
yes.
to be serious.
No, that was something that like is very specific. It was meant to be humorous, and it was something for us. It wasn't like we required that of him in order to start a new character.
You should have.
But I recount it as being kind of like that movie moment, like in the locker room, we're down by like one touchdown at the end of the game, and the coach comes in and is like trying to get us all jacked up, and that's kind of what the equivalent of like that speech was.
That's
for
what
me.
I had in mind. I was shooting for maybe like an Al Pacino in that movie with LL Cool J. What was that movie called?
Oh, Any Given Sunday.
Any Given Sunday. That was a good speech he gave in that. I was shooting for that. I probably came up just a tiny bit short.
So I don't want, Mike had already prefaced something by saying, this is going to be kind of a downer. I don't want to send us on too much of a downer moment, but I think we'd be remiss not at least mentioning this. We actually had a friend we played a lot of EQ with named Peter, who Mike mentioned earlier, who actually passed away. And that's been, a tough thing for everyone completely outside of the spectrum of this, obviously. But he played a ton of EQ with us, played a ton of MMOs with us. I think a lot of our most vivid and funniest and most memorable moments with him involved EQ. And I think that speaks very loudly to the immersive nature and the ability for these games to really invest you in a way where moments spent in the game with him and with each other feel just as momentous and just as memorable and just as important in so many ways as other things we did together, that, it speaks to the power these things potentially have, whether it be for good or bad, to really stick in your mind and really matter to you. I mean, I'd say 9 times out of 10 when we bring him up to, keep him in our mind and our hearts going forward, it's usually an MMO or a computer game story. And that doesn't mean we didn't do fun things outside of that, but we had so many funny, so many memorable, so many awesome moments in game with. Thank MMOs for being part of allowing us all to interact that way.
Yeah, well put.
Yeah. So I mean that isn't meant to be like a giant a giant.
Peter will always be an ogre warrior to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I think when I picture him now, all I can picture is crappy old EQ graphics.
Oh gosh, that ogre is like huge, and it just like walks with like straight arms and legs. It's hilarious.
So does anyone want to kind of weigh in on anything else before we kind of begin to wrap this up in a more general way?
I mean, yeah. I'm just going to touch just a little bit further on that exact point you just made, just
Sure.
how valuable it was, really, with your own relationship and image of Peter. I think the beauty of MMOs, and this can be taken too far, and they can become very addictive, and they can become a type of escapism, and I don't want to dismiss those things, but I think the beauty of MMOs is they really do allow you to express yourself in a way that's not limited by many of the circumstances that do limit us in real life. And the elegance of MMOs is in how players do or do not handle that.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think everything you guys said was very well put. I was gonna take a moment to kind of talk about MMOs and where we see the future headed with MMOs. If we see them on an upward trend, downward trend, how they're gonna transgress across platforms and things like that. So maybe Cam, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, just before we get to that, because I do think that's a very important thing to talk about, and it's a perfect one to sort of segue towards the end on. I am curious. I played a handful of different games, but 95 to 99% of my MMO playing was EQ specifically. And I know for my own purposes, that was because, as we had talked about, I really did have this intense love and attachment to EQ as an experience in a way that even when I could objectively acknowledge that other games were superior in some ways, I always found myself coming back to EQ because it was just ingrained in me in a way
It was
that
your home.
Yeah, it
I mean,
really was.
we're talking about it. You know?
Exactly.
And that's why I called it Play-Doh, because 2,000 years later, we're still talking about it.
But for you guys, did you remain relative? And obviously, I mean, we've talked about how Steve played Elder Scrolls Online. We've all played other stuff. But did you find yourself spending most of your time in EQ for that reason? Or did you just find other games that weren't as satisfying? It's a strange phenomenon because I can objectively acknowledge that a lot of games, particularly WoW, did improve on the EQ formula in many ways, but I never found myself able to consistently want to play WoW. I played WoW for probably 2 to 3 months total over the course of my entire playtime.
I mean, I think it was the case for all of us that EverQuest was really like our first love, and in terms of the MMO experience, and even as I moved on to other games like Elder Scrolls Online, like Star Wars: The Old Republic, which I could even talk about at length, wonderful narrative experience in Star Wars: The Old Republic, etc., etc. But none of them really recaptured that nostalgia, that sense of really almost like belonging that comes about, I think, with everyone's first MMO experience.
I think that sentiment would probably be echoed by a lot of gamers that are really more in our generation. Like you have, I know someone you were saving for the shout-outs, but I know Boogie2998 talks really, really nostalgically about EQ and the experience, and I don't really know exactly what it is. But you're right. I mean, I did dabble in EQ2 for when it first was released, and I think we all started that up.
Yeah, good point.
That was a game that the graphics were just far too intense for a lot of PCs in that 2003, 2004 to really keep up with. But that game's still going pretty strong.
It is, which is nice to see because very good segue by Justin earlier. I think this is a perfect way to sort of encapsulate our overall opinions. Is we're all well aware of the WoW phenomenon, how gigantic WoW got, how it actually even permeated culture with one of the funniest episodes of any animated show ever on South Park.
Yeah.
But Mike mentioned Ultima Online. That was a big kind of progenitor of the rest of the genre. EQ was huge. We all loved it. WoW got gigantic. Now we've got all these sort of hybrid MMO type games that aren't really MMORPGs. We've talked primarily about RPGs, but are MMOs at large. The Destinies of the world. This game, The Division, just launched, which is very similar. The Diablos, if you consider them. Massive multiplayer online elements in games have become kind of par for the course for a lot of gaming. But do you guys think MMOs still have a lot of room for growth? Do you think the genre can still ever be as kind of like all permeating and popular and sort of everywhere as they were during the height of WoW, or maybe even the height of EQ when they were really sort of fresh and new and exciting? Or are MMOs sort of not on their last legs, but sort of not ever going to really reach that peak again?
I mean, so this actually ties in well to EQ Next having the plug pulled on it, because I thought the idea of the sandbox games like Minecraft, which is huge, were really, there was something there to that. And I thought that, is somebody going to make a really good sandbox MMO that's like becomes big? And I thought maybe EQ Next is it, but it just wasn't. So I'm not sure. But I do think that that sandbox world, being able to create things, there's something to that. It's just whether it's an RPG, I don't know, and whether it's based on that kind of random number combat, things like that. That's probably a thing of the past.
So you mentioned the game Destiny, and although I haven't played much of it, everything I've seen and read about it and heard about it suggests to me exactly what I think the future of MMOs, in a certain sense, has to be. I think MMOs have to evolve, and I think they have to evolve away from specifically the idea of just sitting in front of a computer screen. I think that is what our culture is distancing itself from. And I think they need to take on different forms. So consoles could certainly be one form, because the idea of sitting, even though sitting in front of a computer is becoming a faraway concept to many people, still many people are comfortable sitting on their sofa just in front of their TV gaming. But I also think that MMOs are going to make a larger appearance in the mobile gaming world because of the way, frankly, the way people have become attached to their phones. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know.
It's a thing.
It's
Justin.
a thing.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Steve's sentiments with what he was saying about. I think there's definitely a shift more towards mobile gaming. The upcoming generation right now is more about instant gratification and things like that, and because MMOs require a huge time investment, there's not. I don't think a lot of people are willing to make that commitment now. I think, when around the time of EverQuest and other MMOs coming out, I think it was a new concept, a new thing that hadn't really been done before, because before you had, your side scrollers and older console games that, had a definitive beginning and end. And then, early 2000s, something like EverQuest comes out, you have infinite possibilities, open to you. And I think that whole concept was very addictive. It was a way to, it was essentially an immersive lifestyle. And I think, it's starting to get a little bit played out. I mean, there's only so many times you can rebrand something, whether it be like Elder Scrolls or WoW or something like that. I don't know that there's really going to be a growing market for MMOs, but I definitely still see it as something that is more of a niche market now that a lot of people are still interested in. Like Mike has said, I mean, he was playing it as recently as, within the last year. But I'd be curious to see where it goes from here.
Well, let's give Variant their fair due. EQ was actually late 90s back when games were still
Variant.
I apologize.
That was
not,
the company
not
right
2000s.
there.
Thank you for correcting.
Came out in 94, right?
Definitely after 94. I want to say 98.
EQ 90. Well, I think beta was probably 98,
Yeah.
but 99, I think it launched early 99.
Steve must have been playing some early hacked
Because
floppy disk version of it.
the third expansion, Luckland, had just come out when I bought the game. It was, I think, December 2001.
I'm trying to keep my childhood closer at hand than it probably actually was.
Yeah. So as a reminder, we're all old farts here.
Yeah.
But no, I think what you all mentioned is an absolutely perfect point, and I couldn't agree more that I don't think there's ever going to be another really successful WoW clone. I don't think you can do a game like WoW any better than WoW did. I don't think you can do a game like old EQ any better than old EQ did. I think new MMOs that try to take that formula and improve upon it or kind of rehash it aren't really ever going to be able to recapture that height, because, I mean, we were talking about what was, for all intents and purposes, one of the most lucrative models in all of entertainment. We're talking about WoW generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year in subscriptions alone, which like a big budget movie would be absolutely overjoyed with. The idea of a game doing that was like literally blowing minds. So if people think they're going to be able to pull in anything even remotely close to that again, you're not going to be able to do it trying to best what already exists. You're going to have to adapt with the times. I think Destiny is a step towards, while it might not be a step towards what I want to play, I think it's a step towards what lots of people want to play.
I think that's right.
Yeah,
I've seen it in person. It seems pretty cool. I like the AI in the game.
So even though we're all sort of, I think, have our roots in an older kind of iteration of the MMO world, I think we all acknowledge that those times are sort of, they're gone in terms of younger generations or newer gamers really wanting that, and they're gone in terms of the community and popularity and just general level of excitement and intensity about them. You can't really recapture because it really was a lightning in a bottle type of thing. But,
But they'll never be gone from our hearts.
no, and that's what makes, I think, the memories of them so valuable. So any last points anyone wants to make? I feel like we sort of really did. I think an important part of this podcast is to accurately capture the types of things we think about and talk about outside of podcasting, and I think what we just conveyed is pretty much spot on to the way we've always talked about our EQ experiences and our MMO experiences anyway. So I feel like we did a pretty good job really summing up the way I think we all feel. I don't know if there's anything else you guys...
No, I concur. I think it was really, really productive.
Brilliant.
I mean, I'd actually prefer we don't continue because of how emotional I'm getting. Just having thought.
Well,
about
all
these
good things, they do really need to come to an end. So I think that if we kept going, we'd probably lose listeners because we'd run out of things to talk about.
So yeah, let's lay a figurative rose on top of the grave that was our MMO prime. That isn't to say there won't be more MMOing out of us in future. We might talk about it in future installments, and we might even be playing some going forward. But I think we all acknowledge that was a very, very particular, very special time in our development as gamers that we did luckily get to share together. So thank you guys for being my digital comrades /
Brethren.
Sometimes competitors, you assholes. But we want to wrap up each episode going forward, kind of giving some shout outs to people, letting you know what to expect going forward, and just in general doing some house cleaning. So I have a laundry list of shout outs to do. If you guys have any you want to do, maybe it's best to do them first so you don't get stuck behind my endless list of people. So do you guys want to say hi or F you to anybody or...
Hi, Mom and Dad. No, I'm just kidding. I would like to give a shout out to Pure Ownage and the Guild, who actually took the whole MMO and gaming culture and actually kind of turned it into a television entertainment, or actually web entertainment, for my personal enjoyment and hopefully some of the other people here at this table with me.
Mike, you wanna?
Well, first and foremost, I'd really love to give a shout out to this really special group of guys called the Limit Breakers for having me on the podcast. Let's give everybody a round of applause. Really, really small, not too loud. And so yeah, that's that. I think that it was awesome. It's been a pleasure. It's been really cool. And also a shout out to a couple of guys that I've been playing Rocket League with who have been really impressive. There is Euphoria, and 7-Eleven was a part-time job, and a really, really good group of guys. Okay, and lastly, I am working on a book, and it's not an MMO book, but it's kind of I'd like to call it a fantastical science fiction drama with a bit of a postmodern twist that I think is really going to be good, probably in the next 20 to 30 years. So be on the lookout for that.
So when more information about that becomes available, we will keep you up to date.
Yeah.
Check back in,
I would appreciate it. That would be fantastic.
Check back in the third of a century.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to my guildmates in Idle Crusade on server Hestia's Fire, guild called Pikachu. We are, in fact, the top guild on the server, completely undisputed, and it's a joy to play with them, and I'll be sharing this podcast with much of them.
I would be remiss if I didn't start my thank yous without a very hearty thank you to Mike. In a sincere way, we do joke around, but we knew from the second we mentioned doing this episode that you'd be the perfect person to have on. I think your perspective was both unique and also fit within what we wanted to talk about very well. So game to have you back on. You know, obviously that's going to be dependent on what you want to talk about, but it was awesome to have you on.
Yeah,
regardless.
I mean, we're running up the ladder, but I'm up for it. You know, just got to ask the producers and whatnot.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Mike. It was awesome.
Thank you, guys.
I will begin my laundry list of thank yous. It won't always be this long, but because this is our first one, there's a couple I want to get out of the way. A very, very, very special thank you to Nav Pixel. He is an incredible digital artist, specifically a pixel artist who did the work that you will see on our social media. Most specifically, the sort of Game Boy styled green 16-bit looking caricatures of all of us that hopefully you guys have seen by now. He was gracious enough to do that for us. He's an incredible guy. His website can be found at novpixel, novpixel.deviantart.com. Check his stuff out. If you want to hire him, he's pretty much game to do anything similar, and maybe even some other stuff. Just a really cool guy. Check him out. Thank you again for doing that. Second, we made both our intro and outro music in Ableton Live. Now, I checked to make sure that all the samples I was using were able to be used in this podcast. They were. I did some of my own editing on them. I mixed some stuff up, so I didn't just type in podcast intro on Google and copy something. But I do want to thank you to the people that made those loops in Ableton Live. I think it's cool music. Works well for us. It was a joy and a pleasure to be able to use it, and want to make sure you get your due thanks for providing that. So thank you to all the loop masters in Ableton Live. Third, Mike mentioned earlier, probably my single biggest gaming influence in terms of the World Wide Web has been Boogie2988. Probably needs no introduction. He's a very popular YouTuber who does a lot of gaming content. He was also a former EQer, as Mike mentioned. So check him out if you haven't already. He's got a couple million subs, so he's not going to be anything new to you guys. But I do think it'd be kind of a shame not to mention how important he has been to me in wanting to make this. Steve, did you have one before I finished up?
Yeah, I just thought of a shout out, really for history's sake, but a gamer who really inspired me actually for years to come by his incredibly ingenious playing style, but was a Warcraft player who went by the name of Tillerman.
Oh, Tillerman, I remember.
Tillerman, absolutely. And I think he became like a professional poker player and is now coming back to Warcraft. I don't know. But anyway, watching his replays used to blow me away.
I should mention my old guild in case, because the probability somebody might listen to this. Realm of Insanity has been the top guild in EverQuest for more than half a decade now, and it was really awesome to actually meet a lot of those guys. And it's not what you would really expect from a group of online gamers. It's a lot of just kind of normal people, and that was really awesome. And Kulas has been leading that guild. He did a fantastic job, so thanks, guys.
A couple more before we check out here. Happy birthday, Josh Earl. I know Josh checked out the podcast and actually requested a specific episode already. I was so incredibly glad. Guys, you love us, you hate us, you want to request something, please make it known to us. We're interested in your feedback. Josh specifically mentioned maybe in the future doing a Super Mario Bros. 3 episode. I told him I'd be game for that. It was just awesome that he even took the time to send us something. So happy belated birthday, Josh. Thank you for following, and thank you for being a good dude in general. And last but not least, thank you to all the people on reddit.com/r/Final Fantasy. They were gracious enough to not only let me shamelessly plug this there, but actually give us a lot of requests and critiques. And that's something I know we value in general, but especially from people we don't know in person. So you guys are so awesome. Thank you. One last time, as we did last time, we want to let you know where to find us online. Justin brought to my attention that we haven't actually advertised our YouTube channel. That's because YouTube has a new policy where you can't actually get a dedicated username till you get 100 subscribers. Needless to say, we don't quite have 100 yet, so you can find a link to our YouTube channel, which will have all of our episodes on our other social media. So if you want to check us out on YouTube, go to the other social media. You can find it from there. The day we get 100 subs, we will try to make, youtube.com/thelimitbreakers, but right now we're stuck with some randomly generated username. As always, email us at thelimitbreakerspod@gmail.com. Find us on our new website at thelimitbreakers.libsyn.com. Justin, you want to tell them about the Twitter?
Sure thing. You can find us on twitter.com/limitbreakerpod. Tweet us at limitbreakerpod. We would love to get your feedback about this week's episode, last week's episode as well. Share, your favorite MMO experience with us. Post some art, post some topic suggestions that you would like us to talk about. We'd love to give you a shout out on a future episode.
And of course, Facebook. Visit us at facebook.com/thelimitbreakerspod.
So thank you guys again for checking out our first episode. Thank you if you listened to this episode for the full 1 hour and 11 minutes that it's going to end up being. I'm actually glad because it didn't even feel that long. I
Yeah.
felt like we could have talked for quite a bit more. But for Cameron, for
Justin.
and for
Steven.
and for our incredible guest Mike,
And Michael.
thank you guys so much. I had a blast. We're going to keep making these. Stay tuned, and thanks again with Limit Breakers.